On their wedding night, the girl was just about to push the man down when suddenly the wall collapsed. When they finally snapped out of their shock, they realized they were lying on someone else's bed. Nervously turning their heads, they saw a couple staring at them in disbelief. The couple, surprisingly, didn't scold them but instead praised them, saying, "You're so full of life and energy, even managing to knock down a wall." Hearing this, the girl blushed and buried her head in the man's chest before hurriedly running back to their room to rest. But just as they were settling down, a series of suggestive noises began echoing from next door, making their faces flush with embarrassment. They were stunned and could hardly believe that in such a situation, the couple next door could still find the mood for such activities. For a moment, the atmosphere between them also grew somewhat heated. Suddenly, a cockroach crawled onto the man's neck, breaking the moment entirely. At that moment, both of them wished the ground would swallow them whole. Not long before this chaotic situation, they had only just met. Nick was playing football on the beach with his friends when he accidentally hit Lisa, who was walking her dog nearby. Nick rushed over to check on her, and the moment they locked eyes, it was love at first sight. To apologize and get closer to Lisa, Nick immediately invited her to a bar for a drink. During their chat, they realized they were incredibly compatible. Sparks flew, and their mutual attraction quickly blossomed into love. It wasn't long before they decided to be together, and in no time, they were planning to get married. However, when Lisa shared the good news with her family, they were stunned. Their dismay only grew upon learning that Nick was just a penniless young man. They strongly opposed the marriage, as they had already arranged a match for Lisa, a childhood friend who was successful and well-connected. To them, Lisa and her childhood friend were the perfect match. Lisa, however, was determined to marry Nick. Her mother tried to reason with her, saying that love alone isn't enough for a marriage. Marriage involves the day-to-day grind of life, from groceries to minor disputes. If you're not prepared for these challenges, you shouldn't step into marriage lightly. Her father added that marriage is like a long-term investment and must be built on rationality. He warned that a marriage lacking material stability, no matter how strong the love, would eventually erode under the pressures of everyday life. But Lisa was resolute. To her, as long as she and Nick loved each other, everything else could be overcome. Seeing their daughter's determination, her parents had no choice but to give her their blessing. And so, Nick and Lisa had their wedding as planned. During the ceremony, they gazed at each other with deep affection, their hearts full of dreams for the future, unaware of the challenges awaiting them. Their honeymoon began immediately after the wedding, but their first conflict arose as soon as their plane landed. Nick complained that the car Lisa had rented was too small, leaving him no room to stretch. Lisa tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but Nick interpreted it as mocking him for making a fuss. Despite her attempts to clarify, Nick grew more upset, muttering complaints until he nearly collided with an oncoming truck. This only worsened his mood. Lisa, frustrated by Nick's attitude, finally snapped and vented her own grievances. Fortunately, both calmed down quickly, apologized to each other, and resolved the matter with a hug. Shortly after, they arrived at their hotel. As soon as they entered the room, Nick eagerly took out a surprise gift he had prepared for Lisa. However, as the gift needed to be plugged in, Nick approached the outlet. Lisa immediately warned him to be cautious. Nick ignored Lisa's warning and forcefully tried to plug the device in. The next second, the circuit caught fire, causing the entire hotel's power system to shut down. Lisa, terrified, quickly rushed to help Nick up. Seeing that he wasn't seriously hurt, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, when the hotel manager investigated the cause of the accident, they came demanding compensation. Nick immediately got into an argument with the manager. Lisa felt embarrassed, thinking they were at fault and should take responsibility. She tried to calm Nick down, but he told her to stay out of it. In reality, Nick wasn't opposed to paying but was trying to negotiate a lower amount. Unfortunately, the manager lost patience and kicked them out of the hotel. Outside, a torrential rainstorm was raging, and the nearest hotel was over 100 kilometers away. When they finally arrived at the next hotel after a long journey, they found it fully booked. Lisa, already in a bad mood, felt even more upset. To avoid another argument, she kept her frustrations bottled up. As they headed to another hotel, a snowstorm struck. Their bad luck seemed never-ending. On the way, a large truck approached with its high beams on, blinding Nick. Lisa, overwhelmed with anger, lashed out at the truck driver. Meanwhile, Nick, unable to see clearly, accidentally drove the car into a snowbank. They tried to get out of the car, but the doors wouldn't budge. Both were seething with frustration. Lisa sat in silence, while Nick furiously banged the back of his seat to vent his emotions. In a fit of anger, he yanked the steering wheel off entirely. Holding the wheel in his hands, they couldn't help but laugh despite themselves. This little mishap lightened the mood. Sometimes, love is like that. One moment you're at odds, the next you're back to laughing together. That night, they shared a memorable moment. The following morning, after managing to free themselves from the car, they noticed that just a bit further ahead was a steep cliff. The realization sent chills down their spines. But soon, their attention was captured by the breathtaking snowy scenery before them.
The two gazed deeply into each other's eyes and embraced passionately. Just then, a car happened to pass by. They tried to signal for help, but the driver ignored them entirely. In a moment of desperation, Nick grabbed a handful of snow and threw it at the car. The driver, angered by Nick's action, retaliated by ramming their car off the cliff. After that, the driver made an obscene gesture before speeding away. Nick and Lisa were left completely dumbfounded. However, luck seemed to turn in their favor. Before long, a kind-hearted person came by and offered them a ride. Lisa, now relieved, began cheerfully planning the rest of their honeymoon. Lisa had no choice but to agree. However, when they arrived at the booked motel, they were instantly shocked by the dilapidated state of the place. They wanted to turn around and leave immediately, but considering their limited budget, they reluctantly decided to stay. They only wanted to stay there for a short while to escape the cold, but a wall suddenly collapsed. After much difficulty, they managed to lie on the bed, only to have a fist-sized cockroach crawl onto them. Lisa couldn't take it anymore and immediately called her family for help, who booked a presidential suite at a 5-star hotel for them. Although Nick was slightly unhappy with Lisa's decision, he understood that it wasn't her fault. After all, the one to blame for their current situation was himself. The next day, they finally began their honeymoon. They went on boat rides, enjoyed delicious food, and passionately kissed in lively streets. Happiness was written all over their faces. However, as they passed by a place, Nick suddenly stopped and took Lisa to the entrance of a bar. He had heard a live match being broadcasted inside, and as a die-hard fan, he couldn't resist. Lisa tried to persuade Nick that he could watch the game later, but Nick insisted it was a live broadcast. Seeing how much Nick wanted to stay, Lisa, being understanding, let him watch the game and decided to explore the streets alone. Nick, overjoyed, gave Lisa a quick kiss and dashed into the bar. Walking along the bustling streets, Lisa suddenly lost interest in shopping. She returned to the hotel and coincidentally ran into her childhood friend, Ryan. Seeing that she was feeling down, Ryan immediately took her to a museum, knowing her love for history. After leaving the museum, Ryan brought Lisa to an ancient manor, where they engaged in a lively conversation about art with the owner. Meanwhile, Nick was in the bar watching the game when a stranger, a beautiful woman, started flirting with him. Although Nick impulsively followed her to her place, he managed to uphold his boundaries at the last moment. When he returned to the hotel, Lisa wasn't in the room, but he didn't think much of it, assuming she was still out. On the other side, Ryan escorted Lisa back to the hotel and, to her shock, kissed her goodbye. Unfortunately, Nick witnessed this scene and instantly assumed Lisa had betrayed him. Little did he know that after returning to her room, Lisa had slapped Ryan hard and ended their interaction. Nick, unaware, lashed out at Lisa in their room. Lisa tried to explain, but Nick refused to listen. Then Lisa noticed a woman's belonging in Nick's backpack, which turned out to have been placed there by the persistent stranger from earlier. Enraged, Lisa finally lost her temper. The couple had a fierce argument, and their honeymoon ended early. They decided to head back and proceed with a divorce. Even on the way back, they couldn't stop bickering. In the elevator, Lisa deliberately threw gum into Nick's hair, while Nick retaliated by ramming a luggage cart into her. Back home, Lisa immediately moved out, leaving Nick an album documenting all their happy memories together. Looking at the photos of their joyful moments, Nick felt an ache in his heart. From that day on, he became a shadow of his former self, looking despondent and restless. Seeing this, Nick's father, a man of experience, saw through his emotions and realized he still loved Lisa. His father advised him to address any misunderstandings head-on and not let pride destroy their love. Under his father's guidance, Nick finally came to his senses. He realized he couldn't live without Lisa and rushed to her house to win her back. However, the security guard refused to let him in. Determined, Nick confessed his love through the intercom. Hearing Nick's heartfelt words, Lisa's eyes welled up with tears. Her family, moved by his sincerity, opened the gates. Nick dashed in, running across the long road, through the lush green lawn, and past all obstacles until he reached Lisa. They gazed into each other's eyes, unable to hide their love. Sometimes in love, we face many conflicts and challenges. But as long as two people deeply love each other and firmly choose one another, nothing can tear them apart.